Hello, thank you so much for joining us. We are here to talk about Better Call Saul Season 3 as a whole, getting all about Season 3, not just the finale, but we're going to definitely cover that finale as well. And here to join me, very happy to have two very special guests. First of all, friend of the channel, been on all sorts of chats, always fun chatting with you. Don, Willi, thanks so much for joining us for this discussion.
Thank you for having me, man. Better Call Saul. I've been waiting for this. You know, I threw on Breaking Bad t-shirt just for this one. I need to get a Better Call Saul t-shirt for next season.
Definitely. And also very happy to have Phil the Issues Guy. Always great to have you on the channel. I've been watching your Better Call Saul live streams while I was typing up my own reviews, so it's great to actually have you here to talk about it.
Distracting you from doing some actual work, listening to me. But no, Mark, it's always great to be here and talk to you, and it's good to talk to Don Willi again. It's been so long since the last time that Don Willi and I were on a podcast together. It's amazing. But no, I'm excited to talk about this, albeit one of the best shows on television, even in its good and even in its bad. I think still an underrated show, as sometimes the ratings bear itself right now, and the fact that we don't have a season 4 yet. So I want to be part of the solution, part of the promoting of this show, and part of trying to get AMC, because we know where you're watching. We know you motherfuckers are watching, to pick up season 4 of Better Call Saul.
Yeah, and that is the topic I want to get into as well. It's funny because actually before season 3 started, Bob Odenkirk was in New Zealand. They ran this contest of go meet Bob Odenkirk, and he was promoting Better Call Saul over here. So it seems like they were going viciously off trying to promote the show. So yeah, hopefully we'll get into that a lot more. So first, though, I wanted to talk about our overall feelings of season 3. What did you think about this season? That is the big question. We'll start with you, Don. What are your overall feelings on season 3? How did you like season 3?
So season 3 was kind of a roller coaster a bit, you know, and thinking back on how it started versus how it ended. I mean, the beginning was like, okay, where are we going with this? How close are we going to get to Saul? Oh man, this is going to be great. And it's not that it ended lackluster, but I think it's going to be a while before we're able to fully appreciate the impact that especially the last episode has on the entire series. You know, it was a very good episode. The one before it, though, episode 9, was one of those punches to the gut kind of thing. But episode 10, it was kind of like, I know this is the season finale. It doesn't feel like it should be the season finale, though. So that's kind of how I felt about it. But everything else in the middle, I thought was fantastic, especially the build-up to Chuck versus Jimmy and kind of the fallout with that one. So, yeah, I feel it was a phenomenal season. I think that people who are more enthralled with Breaking Bad may take issue with the fact that it doesn't have as much action, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for the storytelling. So, you know, I love it as I did the first 2 seasons.
Great, cool. And so what are some of your thoughts on that, Phil?
And I just to echo right at the end of what you were saying, I also watch it for the aesthetic value of the visual aspects, the fact that everyone creating this show loves what they're doing. And I know that gets oversaid with a lot of shows, but just listen to the Insider podcast. I promote it on everywhere I can go. Watch Better Call Saul Insider podcast. It's all the show creators, the writers, the directors, and some of the actors basically discussing the process. And it's like a real communicative process that fun that they have in this world, I think, comes through on screen, even in the hard, deep parts. My overall thoughts this season, I think overall it's the best season from beginning to end. It has the most impact. I think season 1, they were still trying to figure out what kind of show they were. Season 2 has some excellent moments, better Mike arc in season 2 than season 3. But I think as a whole, our higher highs and our big moments were so big. I agree with what Don Willi was saying. Breaking Bad fans aren't going to love Better Call Saul as their favorite show. Better Call Saul fans aren't going to love Breaking Bad fans aren't going to love Better Call Saul. Stephanie my wife Stephanie, she likes Breaking Bad. She loves Better Call Saul. It's one of her favorite shows ever on television. And as in like what you were saying, I could not agree more with what Don Willi was saying about the season, about the way this season ended. And I see LT in the chat saying that he thought the end of the season ended slowly or ended a little boring for him. And I can understand where people are coming from with that, because the season had a climax, but the climax happened in the middle of the season. Everything that carried on through season 2 for the Jimmy and the Chuck stuff, which was a huge factor of it, all led into that amazing courtroom scene, which should win all kinds of fucking awards for one of the greatest fucking scenes ever put together on television ever. I'm sorry, I'm hyperbolic, but I don't care. I can step out of it. That was fucking amazing acting on everybody's part in the situation, and amazing writing, film direction. The way it all came together is near perfection. The music, the sound design, like everything, blah, blah, blah. But after that, the season started to migrate towards what season 4 essentially is going to be. Put our pieces in place. Mike's storyline ended in episode 9, and they couldn't really have any further to go there. I'll talk more about Mike later, but ultimately, I think the season was a great season, but it was just laid out a little differently. It's part of the reason in the writer's room, they don't necessarily plan a lot of stuff out. It comes organically or naturally, and I think they're just, the peak was in the middle, not at the end.
Yeah, I do agree that it was laid out differently, because I found like with the first 2 seasons in particular, they followed, like, to me, I thought they followed a similar format like the Game of Thrones did in their first 4 seasons, where episode 9 was like the big thing. Like everything was building towards episode 9, and then that was like the huge climax, like the huge thing. But as you mentioned earlier, Phil, they had their climax at episode 5, so in the middle of the season this year instead of episode 9. So when we got to episode 9, I was expecting another big moment, and Kim's car crash was shocking, but to me that wasn't like quite up there with the other episode 9 build. So I don't know. To me, I think I was more of a victim of my expectations, because the way they were building this season up, like we're introducing Gus, we're making a lot more like Breaking Bad is going to be the best season ever. Of course, I say like pretty much every showrunner says that before the season starts, but for some reason, like I really took it to heart, and I do think this was a great season. I do think it may in fact be my favorite of the 3, but it's still, I had unrealistic expectations, you may say, and it didn't meet those unrealistic expectations. I was expecting a lot more to happen, which is unrealistic because the show has established the kind of pace that it's set, and season 3 was consistent with that pace, so it was really unrealistic to me to expect them to go beyond, but I was really hoping that they would. But yeah, so I did really enjoy season 3, but it was a bit more like, I'd say, slow-paced
internal
than I would have liked. Yeah.
I think it was very internal rather than external in the relationships with the brothers and the relationships inside of Jimmy's perspective. I definitely see what you're saying about expectations when you have this particular team working and they created what arguably could be the best show on television, ever on television, in Breaking Bad, and it's the same creative team and the level that they go. But I think the Breaking Bad stuff that they put in, I think is done classily, but it's not the main narrative of the show. But I think going forward, though, they kind of, if we do accept, which I do, that Chuck is dead, we've kind of proceeded on to there. Now it's going to be about combining characters, Jimmy getting in that world and mixing and matching. And I mean, we'll talk more about that later, but that's what I think. I think it's leading in that direction. They're just taking their time and having fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think we should just go ahead and jump right into it and get into the different characters. So I want to talk about the show, the season as a whole, looking at each of the different characters, and we'll start with, of course, Jimmy, because he's the big one in here. Now, we were told before the season started, like a lot of people were saying, "Oh, you're going to get Saul Goodman this year," and Yeah, we kind of did, because we saw the name Saul Goodman on the screen. He was using the name Saul Goodman, but of course, he's still far from the character that we know from Breaking Bad, and that's why I was a bit perplexed by the ending in particular, because he had this sort of, after Kim's car crash, he had this revelation that everything he's been doing is wrong and he needs to be nicer to people, which is not not the way that we know Saul's going to go on. But it was interesting to see his whole journey this season, because of course he starts out with this huge feud with Chuck, and he's getting arrested, and Chuck seems to have the better of him, and he gets together with Kim and manages to turn the tables, but he still has to deal with this suspension, which he can't be a lawyer, so he has no money, and then we see him down on his luck, and so he ends up doing a few despicable things. He goes back to slipping Jimmy ways. He literally slips to get back at people, and then he cons some sweet old ladies. So it seems like they were pushing him to this despicable person, but then all of a sudden Kim's car crash happens, and he wants to reconcile with Chuck. He takes back everything he did, like the gains that he made by counting the old ladies. He took it all back in order to make her feel better, and not more than that, he damaged his entire reputation with the elderly, which of course is kind of pushing him to Saul, because we know that he goes into criminal law, and now this is giving the excuse that he can't do elder law anymore because he's damaged his reputation. But it was an interesting journey. So what are some of your guys' feelings on that?
First thing I want to say is I know it's just a slip up, but you said he cons old lady. It was great. But I think Jimmy. I think we did see Saul Goodman in a couple of places, not just in the name when he was using it. I think in the situation with the old women, when he was doing that, when he went into that montage that we saw of him doing it, that's straight Saul, not giving a shit about anything, just agenda. But I agree with you. It is interesting that his reaction to Kim's accident was to go in the other direction and to go back to Jimmy McGill, neutered post squat cobbler, the Chicago sunroof, Jimmy McGill, and going to the trained dog. Okay, and then he goes to Chuck to try to make up with him, and I think the final kick into going to full Saul Goodman is going to come from those words that Chuck said to him. We might not see Chuck alive in the present time, but those words like Mickey speaking in Rocky's ears, where I'd respect you more if you just went full criminal. I respect you, blah, 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 all that stuff he was saying to him. It's not just going to be you never cared. I never cared for you, Jimmy. Everything that Chuck says is going to haunt him and drive him ultimately to be full Saul. So I like Jimmy's arc this season. At times in certain episodes, I feel like the him and Kim arc was a little stretched after the midpoint of the season. Again, after that big climax, a lot of their action was spread out and could have been mainlined a little bit. But whatever. I don't want to nitpick these guys too much. So yeah, I like Jimmy's arc this season. Bob Odenkirk is great, but I think this was Chuck's season.
Yeah, listen, I'll agree. And I see LT saying he thinks that Chuck is not dead. No, I think Chuck needs to die in order for the last piece of what is going to drive him to become Saul Goodman. I mean, I don't think it's going to be the final piece, but it's going to be one more thing that pushes him towards becoming Saul Goodman permanently, because with the things that Chuck was saying to him, I mean, also what he did to Chuck. Like, he knows what he did to Chuck, and then also the things that Chuck said to him, like the last things that Chuck said to him, about you hurt people, that's what you do. And even he had to acknowledge that. He was like, I'm good at destroying things or tearing things down. I'm not really good at building things. And I think that the impact of knowing that Chuck's house burned down, especially once they get the report of what happened in terms of how the fire started, he's going to blame himself for that. But then at the other end of it, he's going to be like, wait, no, I tried to help my brother get better again, and he spurned me. You know, so there's going to be a dichotomy for a little bit. And I think after a while, we're going to see something's going to happen between him and Kim. And I'm calling it now. I think Kim winds up getting with Hamlin. And I think that's going to be the last. I think that's going to be the that breaks the camel's back for Jimmy in terms of Saul Goodman.
Well, I'm not sure if I see that happening.
That's a hot take.
But I was saying, like I said in my review, and I'll say it again here, is that I do think the main thing that is going to push Jimmy into becoming Saul is Kim leaving him, like not dying or something happening to her career or something. She outright rejects him in a way that makes him feel like dog shit. I think that is going to make him like cut off all the emotions entirely, because with Chuck dying, that's more of going to make him feel a bit guilty again, which is pushing him away from becoming Saul.
My turn for crazy crackpot theory. Kim is alive during Breaking Bad, and we never see Saul go home. So they were talking a little bit about this. I've heard a couple people talk about this, and they were joking about this in the Better Call Saul Insiders podcast too. Kim is actually alive, happily married. But I don't really believe that though. I tend to agree with both of you guys. I think something bad is going to happen to Kim. I think because I don't think Kim really has Google eyes or is in this thing full force. I think she does care about Jimmy, but eventually him being Jimmy is going to be too much for her, and she's going to kind of walk away from the situation. I think she almost did in this season, and then it's when she got fragile and had to go to Blockbuster. And yes, I loved Blockbuster LT. They had to recreate the bit about that, but they did have to pay Blockbuster company royalties just to use like the sign and stuff like that.
All right. Well, I'm going to get sidetracked a bit and talk about Blockbuster, because I actually paused the scene to see what movies were there, and they had like Knight's Tale and Walkman Prophecy.
They paid painstakingly attention to what videos they had and what videos people Kim picked up, and they said most people won't stop and notice those things, but for the few people that do, that's why we do that. Mark, they're talking to you.
Yeah, I didn't actually see the ones that she picked up. I just saw the ones in the new release section and saw that they were what would be in the new release section in 2003. So they did pay attention to that, although they had a mighty large section for Lawrence of Arabia. Now, maybe it was getting like a deluxe edition in 2003, but I don't think they'd have that many copies of it.
I also think it's interesting you mentioned that, just because before we go too far off track, but I do want to say we've finally got an exact time. I don't know if we've got that before, but this is 5 years before the start of the time of Breaking Bad. They said, I think it was in this episode, in episode 10, they said it was at one point 2003. So we now have like a concrete date. We might have had one before, but I didn't remember having as clear.
I actually, because to tell you how nerdy and observant it was, I actually noticed this a couple episodes ago when Kim wrote Howard the check. I actually paused and saw the date on the check said March 2003.
Oh, dude.
Yeah. Because I was actually interested to know how much, because I know that the first season was taking place in 2002, so I wanted to know how much time has passed since then. So not quite a year, but around a year.
Good to know they care about such things, unlike some other shows that even great shows that don't necessarily care about how long time is. But anyway,
let's not Let's not go down.
I'm not saying the name of said show.
Oh God.
There'll be enough talk about that in months to come here. So sorry.
Because then,
I know what you
got jetpacks and teleporters, and we're not going to do
not
that.
In this universe. Not in this universe.
I know what you want. You want to use my teleporter.
we could have Mayor Cicerati popping on in here.
Oh God. Oh God.
No, yeah, that's the thing, is that I know like this show and like Vince Gilligan and the other creators do pay attention to details. So I know
a lot about that.
Yeah.
They have arguments about it. They pay so much attention to this bullshit.
But getting back to Kim for a second with her the theory that she'd still be around in Breaking Bad times is I was on board with that theory, considering it a huge option. But just watching this season, like the way the season ended, now I'm now convinced that that's not likely to happen. That's more likely because you see her relationship with Jimmy is really on tethers at the moment, and it seems like she's not like he's more holding on to her than she is on to him. So I think it's a bit lopsided that way, which is why I think her rejecting him is what's going to destroy his.
Watching him destroy his brother and even taking part in that, because in some level she feels sorry for Chuck. We see that moment with Kim, with the Mesa Verde person, where she cuts her off and screams at her and lets all that anger she has towards Jimmy about what he's doing to Chuck transferring onto her in that situation. So that's going to build up. And when Chuck dies and maybe Jimmy doesn't have the reaction she necessarily wants to it, or overly emotionalizes it and she can't handle it or something, that could be a catalyst to get her to leave as well.
And that's why I'm telling you guys, calling it. Right? He's going to get with Hamlin because, look, at the end of the day, Hamlin was a mentor the same way Chuck was. But the difference is, they both know, right? Whether Hamlin can prove it or not, Hamlin knows that Kim and Jimmy kind of set Chuck up to fail. Kim feels bad about that.
Mm-hmm.
Kim feels really, really bad about that. And I'm telling you, I think that after this whole, after Chuck dying and her guilt about what they did to Chuck, she's going to somehow, some way, she's going to wind up with Howard Hamlin. And that's going to be the thing that really drives Jimmy over the edge, because he's going to be like, these were the guys we were fighting against. We were fighting to gain our independence from Chuck and Howard, and now you leave me for Howard. Just think about it, how heartbreaking it would be for the girl that you fell in love with to leave you for basically one of your worst enemies.
Well, I will say this about your theory to give it a bit of credence, is that I was wondering at the end of the season how they're going to make Howard relevant, if they're just going to write him off the show, because with Chuck gone, it doesn't seem like there'd be much for him to do. But if they have a relationship with him and Kim, then that would be a way to keep him relevant and keep him on the show. And I know you've been saying this in your videos, Phil, is that I think the actor who plays Howard has really come into his own this year, and it's improved a lot and done some amazing performances this year.
And I also think we're going to get a lot of him and Jimmy next season, which could like credence this too, because Jimmy's going to try to get that money, or that Chuck's money is Chuck's next to kin, because I know the original check burned up, but he doesn't have, and did he ever lose power of attorney over Chuck? Doesn't he have, wasn't that a factor in season 1? I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I saw season 1, but wasn't there this whole thing at the beginning of the season with trying that Jimmy had some sort of stake in whether Chuck sold the company, because then he would get some of that? I don't know. I could be making that up in my imagination. Again, it's been a while since I saw season 1.
That could be the case.
No, what happened with that whole thing was Howard was trying to insinuate that he wanted him to cash out Chuck because somehow Jimmy would collect money off of that.
Okay.
And Jimmy kept on saying, nope, it's not my money. That's Howard's money. And he was the one that was really trying to push for Chuck to retire early before it got too bad. And Chuck just kept on, no, I'm going to beat this.
And oh my gosh, sorry, LT. I didn't know that Howard was on Saved by the Bell the college years, and I watched that shit.
Oh, really? Yeah, I never watched.
Yeah, I think he was the teacher that
hooked up with Kelly.
Yeah.
Okay, that was him. Fuck, I do remember him now. Fucking dickhead. Dude, that's Zach's girl, dude.
Virginia Dio in the chat says that I think Hamlin is too old to be with Kim. Well, I mean, if he still has a lot of money, you know.
And yeah. But with Kim, I think there's definitely the time clock on Kim and Jimmy's relationship, and it's ticking, and it's there, and it's gonna erupt. Whatever she does next is whatever she does next. But either way, she's not staying long game in this situation.
Yeah. I really do get that sense, especially from this season, that the relationship seems it's not very stable. and I do think her leaving is that's why I'm so because I know her leaving would have that effect on him to sort of make him cold and distant. So that's why I could be wrong. This show always does stuff to prove me wrong, because before I was convinced that Chuck would end up in a mental institution, but no, it turns out he ended up dead. But getting the Kim, which is another character I want to talk about. We've already been talking about her a bit, so I want to talk more about her journey, because her journey this season was pretty clear. That the season made it very clear that she was just overworking herself. In fact, it was revealed in this finale that she was working off of 6 hours of sleep an entire week. I mean, that is I don't know if that's clinically possible. It's certainly clinically, unfit. That's just insane.
Yeah, and she's also showering in the gym and shit like that.
Yeah, I mean, at first I thought I kind of was wondering what the purpose of those montages were. It's do we really need to see this? But then I learned we absolutely needed to see it, because it was absolutely setting up just to show the kind of lifestyle that she was living that was all leading to this car crash. And I think it's interesting to see what her changing character is going to be and how this will affect her relationship with Jimmy, because she's apparently had this epiphany where she's just wants to sit around watching Blockbuster videos all day, because she realized that she's just wasting her life and living a very unhealthy lifestyle. So I wonder if she's going to become this slump where she's going to totally give up Mercer Verde and everything else altogether.
Well, I don't know that she's going to give up everything altogether. I think that, for one, her overworking herself like this, she doesn't blame Jimmy now, but I think she's going to after the death of Chuck. I think she's going to be look at, it's things were cool when I was at HHM. You told me to leave. That started this whole downward spiral. And, then next thing you know, I'm in a car crash, and Chuck is dead. And I'm basically an accessory to the fucking long-term suicide or something like that. Thanks to you. You're an asshole, Jimmy. And so I think that while things are, where she loved the fact that Jimmy was willing to do anything for her, but then she's going to say, you know what, anything is too much. Anything to help me is too much, because, what's the next step? It's cool when we were just having a little bit of fun here and there, but now things have become way too serious. We've lost the office. I've only got one client that I'm barely doing anything with at all, and your brother committed suicide because we went out of our way to discredit him on the stand and to destroy his life. And I think her coming to that revelation is going to be the part where she's like, you know what, I think we need some separate time. And in that separate time, I'm telling you guys, you already know, I've already told you where this is going to go. But I think we're going to see, for season 4, episodes 1, 2, and 3 are going to be her and Jimmy kind of back and forth falling out. Episode 4 is going to be, I think we need some time apart. episode 9 is gonna be where where Jimmy catches Kim and Howard Hamlin kissing or something. Episode 10 is Howard and Kim walking away, 100%, and Jimmy is like, fuck it, I'm Saul Goodman forever now.
That is interesting. But the one thing I would actually think about is that, and getting back to Jimmy for a bit, is that we got that scene with him and the cleaning up, doing the community service, picking up the garbage, and then when he was talking to that other convict, and he managed to sort of con his way out and told the guy who was going to supervise, who was going to sue him or whatnot. To me, that was sort of the biggest indication that he was becoming the Saul Goodman, because he was learning that he can make a lot of money off of drug dealers and petty criminals. So I think that maybe in the next season he'll start to go down that way even more, and he'll get caught up with Mike somehow or something like that and do something really criminal or really shady. And that's what's going to push Kim away entirely, is that she's going to, and because Kim has always been the push for good in his life. Like that's why he actually went to Davis and Maine in season 2, was because of her. And that's why he decided to stick with becoming a lawyer and not go back to the slipping Jimmy ways, is because of her. So I think the more he tries to do criminal stuff, she's just gonna push him out entirely, and that's what's gonna push him into this criminal stuff entirely. Is once she's gone, he's out. I'm still not sold on this Howard relationship thing. I mean, it's still possible, anything's possible, but I do think that was that's another sort of interesting thing to consider.
Yeah.
The chat is not sold on it either. All right, it's not funny anymore. It's not. It was a joke.
I also think, to add to what Don Willi was saying about, even with the stuff that Kim doesn't know, or maybe I can't remember if Jimmy told her that what he did with the insurance people and doing that last little con that he did in the moment. I don't think he told Kim that, but knowing Jimmy and knowing the kind of person that we've seen Jimmy be, when he finds out Chuck dies, he might admit that to Kim in an upset moment, that he did that too, is one of the last things to push him over the edge. I shouldn't have kicked him when he was down. And Kim's gonna be like, you did what now? You kicked him again? And that might be something, another impetus that sends her off into that direction. One question I ask, and this is more about the Jimmy and Kim relationship and about the future of Saul, or the future of Jimmy doing exactly what you were talking about, working with criminals as a lawyer. He still has 9 months, whatever it is, 10 months of not having his license. Are we going to see a time jump between? People are asking about 4. I'm assuming 4 is going to be picked up. In the writers' room, they're like, we haven't got the pickup yet, but we haven't started working, but they're confident that it's going to happen. So if it doesn't, Netflix will pick it up. I know it will happen. We'll get a season 4 of Better Call Saul. It will happen one way or another.
I mean, it doesn't cost them any fucking money. This ain't The Walking Dead. You know what I'm saying?
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? The Walking Dead DC? The Walking Dead here? What fucking Walking Dead Miami Beach? No, stop.
Yeah, we're going to talk about season 4 is going to happen. It's just going to happen, so we'll have that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, look, think about it like this, right? For anybody who might be thinking, the ratings. Look, it's also about how much money it's going to cost them to make the show. They got all the same actors. These aren't super high profile. We got to pay them millions of dollars per episode actors, right? Even though they are phenomenal and they deserve that kind of money, and I wish they could get that kind of money. But
the crews take hometown discounts because they like working on the project. They want to work on this team. So people don't necessarily take or push it, and they'll work it out. They'll find ways to make the shit work in their schedule, like an Arrested Development or something like that. They believe in the project enough.
And then you don't have to worry about CGI, right? There's no CGI to worry about. So it's not like they're sitting there like, oh my God.
This show does need more direwolves. This show needs direwolves on this show.
We got to worry about the 3D graphics artists or fucking Dragon development and all. Like, no, they don't So I mean, it costs
And
them.
Michael McKean's going to win an Oscar this year or a fucking Emmy this year.
Emmy. He deserves to. Yeah, definitely. But I want to get back to Kim for a second here because I had a bit more to say on that. Because another interesting point I was going to bring up is that, fuck, you kind of lost my train of thought. I had something very important to say about her. But is that Kim, she was...
looks good in pajama bottoms.
Yeah, definitely. Is that I think that she made it clear that she wasn't blaming Jimmy for the car crash is the one thing I wanted to bring up is that Jimmy blamed himself for the car crash. And so that's part of the reason why he had this turn in his character is because he thought he was responsible. But I don't think Kim is holding him responsible. I take her at her word when she says, it wasn't you. You didn't tell me to get in this car. So I don't think she necessarily holds that against him. But I think she will hold against him when he starts doing more shady stuff. And if Phil, like you said, she admits what she did with the old ladies, I think that is going to be a real push away. So I think that is a major thing that could happen.
I talked a little bit about that on my review too. I agree, but Jimmy just seems like the type of person that he doesn't give a shit about himself, so he wants to have everyone cast blame upon himself. So hate on me, you know. It's all he thinks everything is his fault. It's like when I go somewhere, like if someone's watching me or for cop, like I always think I'm the one that did something wrong. I have a similar thing to Jimmy. That's one of those things that I can relate to Jimmy McGill from. I'm like, it's my fault. Sorry, guys. We're going off subject because of me. It's my fault. It's my fault. Sorry.
Now, that's the thing. That's a good point, though, because I think that's the one thing that Jimmy needs to his change in his character in order to become Saul Goodman. Because Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad doesn't give a shit.
Doesn't care. Yeah,
he doesn't care. So it's something major has got to happen for him to like just not give a shit anymore. And I think that is Kim rejecting him.
I've already said. Hey, people keep on fighting me on this.
Hey, I'm not rolling it out together. I think it's definitely still a possibility.
I mean, look. Here's my whole thing, right? Because him rejecting him and not being with someone else would still give Jimmy the sense that there's a way back for him. Kim rejecting him and then getting with his arch nemesis means there is no redemption. There's no way back at this point. I have lost the one woman that I love, the one person who still mattered to me. I have lost them to the dark side.
See, I agree with you. I just don't think it's going to be Howard. I just think it's going to be leaving. I think you are onto something. I don't think it's going to be Darth Vader, though. I think. But I mean, with this show, though, you honestly never can tell. If someone brings it up into the writer's room, they could go, well, she does really thank him for those loans, and he's always interested in her. He loves him. They could be possible. I'm sure someone's brought it up. I'm not laying credence to it, but I do think I don't know if we're going to actually see Kim with somebody else. I think it's more just going to be I'm done with this, and then we're not going to see Kim again.
Yeah, I think I'm more of agreeing with you, Phil, and I think it might be related to her changing character that we saw in the finale of her and she's gonna she might even get out of the law altogether, which was always her biggest tie to Jimmy. And once she does that, then there's just nothing, and she's just gonna reject him. But yeah, so I think I want to move on now to a different topic. Let's talk about, and Phil, you alluded to earlier that this whole season has been about Chuck. So let's talk about Chuck. I want to get all into this Chuck because he had a really interesting storyline this year, of course, because he almost became Jimmy. He became Slipping Jimmy, set up this huge con to entrap Jimmy, and then hired like PIs to sit around and to provoke him to like break in his house and steal his stuff, and then put him on trial, which actually blew up on his face. And after that, I think being outed in court like that and discovering for himself that his condition was mental, not physical, actually was a really positive force for him. And and he was actually making to, you know, seeing the doctor, and he was like actually becoming better and having a positive change. But of course, the backlash of what happened with his vendetta, Jimmy, came back to bite him in the ass, where Howard just like basically forced him to retire. And when Chuck tried to fight it, you know, only made things worse and destroyed his relationship with Howard. And of course, the things he said to Jimmy, I think, telling him that, oh, you never mattered to me. That was like one of the hardest, that's like rough thing. And I think that was a side effect and maybe even contributed to him actually wanting to kill himself, because he had nothing left at this point. So that was a very interesting journey this year. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so many thoughts. And it ultimately at the end there, him saying that to Jimmy cast him off. I think ultimately it was more about Chuck has his real mental disorder, but Chuck's also an egotist. And Jimmy being right, Jimmy getting the best of him, Jimmy saying to him, you're going to die alone. It's self-fulfilling prophecy at that point in time. Because I think ultimately, I talked a lot about this on my channel, I think Chuck is even more upset about the loss of the business. He did not think this was going to go like this. Everything with Jimmy, it's Jimmy killing him in court was huge. It really was huge. But ultimately, to mention it again, the insurance thing seemed to be like the final blow. Like he had the opponent up against the wall. If he had just left it there, Chuck probably still would have been in an advisory role, might not have got the help. It would have pushed on his crash bottom, but ultimately the situation would have gone a lot differently. But because he did that last thing and then Chuck turned it on Howard and alienating the last person that was there to support him from a personal level, it was just crazy. And in the way, and the end of this season especially was Chuck's, and as slow as it was or as crazy as it was in this last episode was uncomfortable to watch in the best possible television way, in that way that season 1 of Breaking Bad's uncomfortable to watch sometimes, with like real human events happening on screen that are being depicted excellently by a comedian. And I know Michael McKean is a actor that's done drama in the past, but he's a comedic actor that's giving like one of the best dramatic performances of his life, and showing a man going crazy and going first of all struggling to get healthy. And after Jimmy eviscerated him in court, like going out, going to that phone booth, Vince Gilligan or Peter Gould called it the hero's journey, like walking the hero's journey to the booth to get help, to call that woman. But then like Chuck's ego, he pushed too fast, too far at the beginning. Like, oh, I'm better now. I'm going to get in the courtroom today, instead of really actually getting better. His ego thought he would be automatically fucking better. No, you're not automatically fucking better, Chuck. Your mind can't conquer this thing. You're really sick. It's a real fucking sickness. And then ultimately all of that to cast Howard out, and then to go completely crazy, and Michael McKean doing all of his own stunts in that last scene, or destroying his own house. Like that was Michael McKean doing all that destroying and shit. Just unbelievable to an explosive way to end the season. And I like that the house didn't blow up like a cheesy thing. It like, oh, he's already obviously dead if it blows up. He's obviously dead because he just kicked fire in a bunch of papers that he wants to die. He's not dive bombing out the window, or he's not hiding under a dumpster. I know that's the joke right now, but he's not hiding under a dumpster. But ultimately, he's dead. He wanted to die, and he's dead, and it's sad, and it was uncomfortable, and so fucking well done.
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quick that I totally agree. I love the way that final scene was shot. It was just so perfect, the way we don't actually see the lantern hit the floor. They cut to a wide shot where we see it slowly glow up in flames. It was such a beautiful artistic way to show that Chuck is dead. I know someone in the chat, I think, mentioned earlier they thought Chuck was still alive. I don't know if they were joking, but I think we can confirm that he is.
If he is, and this is spoiler alert for Oz, he's like Dylan McKay in Oz, and Father Cloutier or whatever his name was. And I'll leave it at that. If he is, that's the kind of position he's in right now, and he's not long for this world. I could see them bring Michael McKean in for one day of crazy makeup to have like one moment where he tells Jimmy he hates him one more time. Like, Jimmy, I hate you from hell's heart.
Now, I think it's actually much better story-wise for the ended here with him, which is why I think they would, because those being his last words to Jimmy being, "You never mattered to me," was actually last words.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome that was his last words to Jimmy. That's going to really feel good. Like when Omaha, what's his Gene? Omaha Gene, Cinnabon Saul Gene. Like that's going to stick in his craw every day when he's thinking about his brother. Oh, my brother. I never really mattered to my brother. And that's my last thing about Chuck before I let Willi talk. He's an asshole. And through this whole thing, from beginning to end, no matter what his state is, his number one main focus is being a prick face asshole. We all know a guy like Chuck, and we all think he's an asshole. Whether they're an older brother, older cousin, parent, whatever, best friend, or some asshole down the street. Chuck is an asshole. Sorry, I'm okay.
You know what? I'm gonna go on record as saying that I think that Chuck was totally just done. Look, I'm not even gonna finish that sentence. Chuck definitely was an asshole. I mean, when we saw the episode where it's the first time in a long time, I guess, or since him and Rebecca had divorced, she comes to the house. Now Jimmy goes out of his way to get her there. You know, set up everything, and they're like, all right, trying to have this nice dinner. Chuck starts freaking out about the damn cell phone, and he's like, tell her. You know, he's trying to get the man some sympathy, and he just like, nope, I can't let her know that I am in this really fucked up place. And that is Chuck's hubris. You know, it's one of those things where you're looking like, dude, you would rather save face. You would rather save face with the whole thing of, I need to make sure that she sees me in a certain light, rather than tell her, look, you know what? I'm not doing so well, and you know, possibly getting some understanding out of her. You know, because since he doesn't do that, when she shows up to the court later, and he kind of goes on his rant, like, yeah, she knew that Jimmy set that up, but at the same point, it's like she was willing to still go to bat for him when she didn't have to. And yeah, like I can't really feel sorry for Chuck. I can't, only because it's not like people didn't try to save him from himself. He's one of those narcissistic people that thinks he has all the answers and that only he is able to make things right. So for him, you know, and it must have been like, I'm wondering how long was he there after he told Jimmy that he didn't care about him? Because if you noticed, when he was kicking that lamp off, there was a lot of stubble on his face. When he saw Jimmy, he was clean shaven. So I'm going to say that might have been almost a week after. It depends on, you know, how long it takes him to grow stubble or whatever. But I'd say about a week later is when he did the whole thing with the lantern. So that means in his own mind, he's been festering on that for days, ever since Jimmy showed up and tried to reconcile him with him, and he refused to hear what he had to say. So yeah, you know, Chuck, fuck you. You made someone who was trying to be a good man turn out to be a piece of shit scumbag lawyer.
I'm sorry, Mark. And he fucked over Ernesto. Someone in the chat said that.
Yeah. Yes, that's true.
He fucked over Ernesto
poor Ernesto. Yeah.
Poor Ernesto. It was such an innocent in all of this shit. And that's an awesome pickup, Don Willi, about a stubble, because he probably for like at least 3 or 4 days or a week destroyed that house, even after like he just continued that. That's the missing time that we might get in flashbacks in future seasons of that time in between when he's destroying the house and when he finally makes that decision to kick over the lantern.
Yeah, because in that final shot at the very end of the episode, you see all the shit, all of his like possessions are out on his front lawn, just in tatters. So yeah, he definitely went on for quite a bit of time. But I was going to say about Chuck is that in the first 2 seasons in particular, there were a lot of people. I watched a lot of reviews and people talking about it online saying who were Chuck defenders, who would literally say, oh, in Chuck's defense, Jimmy actually is like doing shady shit. He's going up and, you know, faking falling off billboards. Chuck is justified in some way in thinking that he'll always be slipping Jimmy. And the good thing about the show is that is true in some ways. In some ways, Chuck was justified in thinking that, but the show also made it very clear that he took it too far, that it was beyond simply being concerned about the law like he was claiming, that he was being petty and he was jealous of it, which is why I think it was so important to get these flashbacks with Rebecca and stuff like that, because it shows how jealous he was of Jimmy.
To quote the great movie The Big Lebowski, "You're right, Walter. You're just an asshole." So yeah, he is right. But there's ways of embracing Jimmy. But Jimmy ultimately was dead to him that day he went to the police station. Because I don't believe Chuck never cared about him. I think we got that scene at the beginning of episode 10 with him at the campfire to show that at one point he did care about him, but it's the stealing from the father. And then ultimately the culmination of it is going and having to bail him out for shitting in someone's sunroof. It's funny to think about it, but I think that was the moment where he was truly embarrassed. And then he hoped that he just bailed him, put him in the mailroom and never had to think about him again, and just knew where he was, never had to control him, could control him within his little universe, kill him with platitudes, knew that he meant enough to him to kind of just keep him there. What he didn't calculate is that for love or pussy or whatever, for Kim, he and for Chuck's respect, that he'd have enough get up and go, as Howard used to call him. What do you call him? Johnny Sketchy. No, what the hell?
What am I now?
Charlie
Hustle. Yeah, that's
Charlie Hustle. Like he went above and beyond and went into montage mode and got his fucking degree. So I think it became out of his control, and then so ultimately at a certain point in time, I don't think Chuck really doesn't care about him. I think he actively is angry at Jimmy and wanted to find any way to hurt him on the way out.
Well, because the great irony is that if Chuck actually believed in Jimmy and gave him the benefit of the doubt, then Jimmy actually might have become a better person. The fact that he kept telling him, "You'll always be slipping Jimmy," it actually made him worse. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Him saying that to him actually made him believe it, which is also why I think his final words to Jimmy being, "You'll always hurt everyone, just accept it," is something Jimmy is going to take to heart, especially being his final words, and it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that's why he'll believe that there's no point in me trying to be good because I'm just going to hurt everyone, so I'll just accept it. So it is interesting, the power that Chuck had over Jimmy. But the one thing I did want to sort of get into, because I noticed in our reviews, Phil, we had different takes on this. So I wanted to get into sort of debate or whatever, start this, is that in the scene in the finale where Chuck and Howard were going at it, and Chuck is like, "Oh, we can end this all right here with a handshake," and you see Howard looking at that hand like it's like poison. He's just like, "Oh, get that fucking hand away from me." But the thing is that, and I said this in my review, and a lot of people disagree with me, but I'm going to stick by this, is that I actually feel that Howard isn't the victim that he's playing himself out to be, that the blame isn't totally on Chuck, and that the way Howard handled Chuck here is actually contributed to Chuck wanting to kill himself, because I believe that, like, Howard, because the one thing that Howard said, which I was like, no, that's not true, is when Howard said, oh, I politely suggested that you retire, because he didn't politely suggest. He was forcing him. He gave him an ultimatum. He gave him no choice. You have to retire. Get the hell out of this firm, which you built. So in that way, I can kind of see Chuck's position that he took, why he tried to fight it, because he felt like he was being treated unfairly, especially considering how Chuck was actually turning himself around and was actually getting better and was getting help. And then Howard comes and basically doing the same. Howard does the same thing that Chuck did to Jimmy and not believing in him and not believing that he could get better.
I think some of the issue there is that, because I do agree that Howard probably does have some to do to blame to it, but I think ultimately it comes down to Chuck's assholery again, because he had to take it to that next level. Instead of getting better, coming in for a special meeting, like and sending a letter that isn't his retirement, but instead of suing him, a letter that says, please give me 3 months to get back to shape and come in and have a meeting with you, and let's curb this thought. You know, if you'd done it more tactfully or something, and again, to go with your previous statement, if him and Jimmy could just work together, someone said this in the chat room during my review, if him and Jimmy could work together, they would be unstoppable. I don't think Howard is completely not to blame. I think Howard obviously had an agenda, and I think I'll take it to a different tact with that, not necessarily in that moment, but overall, he enabled Chuck to be who he was. And enabled this kind of behavior, and shouldn't have been as surprised that Chuck went that level. And he even said something to that effect. I've seen you do this to countless other people. I just never thought you would do it to me. That's stupid. If you're dealing with somebody and someone's a freaking dick to everyone else, you see them, you have a friend that fucks over every one of the other friends, but always says to you, you know what? I'm never fucking you over. Guess what? That person's going to fuck you over too eventually. It's going to happen. I'm sorry. And that's what ultimately happened with Howard. And Howard was a victim of his own stupidity too. And a little bit what Jimmy would say, you're sitting there curdling, drinking, like a little bit too much in awe of Chuck. And then when he snapped, and almost when the bridge breaks eventually, it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. I was thinking myself, like when I used to have a lot of people hang out at my house and have like parties there and stuff for like an hour before I actually kick people out. Maybe 2. I would want them to leave, but I wouldn't say anything, and I'd just be nice to people and be like, yeah, guys, I'm having a great time, or just keep my mouth shut, and then eventually just go, get the fuck out of my house, and scream and just like freak out and shit. And I think that's what happened with Howard to a certain extent too. He just dealt with it, and eventually just freaked out and kicked everyone out of his house, or kicked Chuck out of his house.
Well, I think the big like sort of moment is when one of the most important scenes as far as Howard goes is when Kim goes to him. And it's amazing actually how much, because he tried to put the blame squarely on her and Jimmy. And she was like, well, you knew about Chuck's condition all along and you hid it from your clients. So if the company's name's being driven through the mud, that's on you. And I think it's amazing how much he actually took that to heart. Like he totally like took that to heart and believed her. And I think that's why he had this massive change that it was his fault for trusting in Chuck, and that's why Chuck needed to go. And so that's why I agree with what you're saying, Phil. I don't think it's either, I don't think it's Howard's fault entirely. I'm not putting the blame, because I can see his perspective. It's more of sort of a tragedy that the two of them are sort of meeting. And Howard should have.
And it's so real, like situations like this.
Absolutely.
Always, and again, whether Breaking Bad is a little less realistic than Better Call Saul in some ways, in the ways that the characters interact in human relationships. Not saying Breaking Bad doesn't have that same element, but sometimes Better Call Saul can't be the most exciting thing on television, but it's always fucking real. The relationships stand the hell up, and this is where some of the similarities with Game of Thrones at its best too. The characters are all gray areas. There are no true good guys or bad guys in any of these situations. They are gray areas. It's not even like at the end of Breaking Bad, Walt's a fucking asshole and a bad guy. He's a fucking bad guy. Those Nazis that we meet at the end that fuck when working for Matt Damon's younger, more Todd. Like they're fucking evil fucking people. But on Better Call Saul, even with like Saul and I'm even with Gus and stuff like that, we'll get to that a little bit later. He's they're not just one thing. And Better Call Saul does that better than almost any show ever on television, of showing these full-fledged human characters. And in this situation, you're right. It's neither one's truly at fault, because they're both at fault and they're both right. And they're both, except Chuck's not right. He's an asshole. He shouldn't have that situation. He should have just gone in with an ultimatum. He didn't need to take it to that level.
Yeah, I will agree with you there that Chuck, his response was it wasn't the right response, but I think that was his arrogance showing out. He's thinking, oh, I'll be able to just push my weight along. And so he's shocked when it didn't go his way, and when Howard was willing to pay money from his own pocket in order to get rid of him.
I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Let's see how you handle it. They were both each other's Schwartzes there, and Howard won. And what a setup of that situation too. Of the end of this episode, where I know we're focusing a lot of our attention on the last episode, but it focuses all to the culmination of a whole season, so it makes sense. But that moment when he completely embarrasses Chuck, speaking of people's reactions, what Howard has to do, we definitely need to see, and it's going to be very intense, and I am extremely curious to see what Howard's reaction to all of this happens. He's going to have a stronger reaction than Jimmy, than Kim. I think Kim and Howard, because Don Willi, I think, was mentioning this too. Kim and Howard, especially, I think, are going to have huge reactions to this. And I don't know if Jimmy might go the he's dead to me route again. Like we don't know how what Chuck said to him at that last moment meant to Jimmy. That might have just been like, fuck, I'm trying last time. He fucked me over. No responsibility. Like, that might be, whether what happens to Chuck doesn't happen to Chuck, that might have been the final, because he was close to that anyway. And I don't even know why he came back. I think that was slightly out of character. And again, not to nitpick, but that the Kim situation made him want to forgive Chuck. I think it was just a moment to have one last scene with Michael McKean and Bob Odenkirk together. I think it was kind of a cheap moment of, like, because I don't know if it would make a lot of sense for Jimmy to go back there in the story that we've seen, but I guess it does make sense because Jimmy's a fucking emotional bastard. I'm wrong. I'm arguing myself out of it. It does make sense because Jimmy's a sap. Jimmy is a fucking sap.
I mean, look, he wants to do the right thing. The guy that we see in Breaking Bad is not the guy that we see here. We're moving towards there, but at the end of the day, it's like, look, Jimmy's the guy who wants to do the right thing, but when situations make him desperate, that's when he goes into slipping Jimmy mode, right? He got desperate earlier this season, because of his law license being taken away, and he's trying to figure out how is he going to get money now. He's down to, doing everything with credit cards. He's seeing that Kim is stressed out, and he's like, look, I want to do the right thing, but I don't know how when I'm this far in the hole. And even when he realizes, okay, well, damn, like what he did with the old lady at Sandpiper, he realizes how badly he fucked up. That wasn't his intention. His intention was get the settlement, get it done, finito, get the money. Me and Kim don't have to worry anymore. But, he still has integrity. And I think that Chuck not taking into account that Jimmy is not trying to purposely hurt people is the thing that really sets those two apart, because Chuck is so black and white about everything. He's not looking at how was this intended to come off. He's just looking at, you did this thing, either it was right or it's wrong, and that's all that matters. If the law says it's wrong, then it's absolutely wrong. It doesn't matter what you did it for. Whereas Jimmy was like, look, the law might say it's wrong, but just because it is a law doesn't mean that it's right. And that's the big difference between him and Chuck. And I think that, going forward, it's going to be one of the things where Jimmy is going to wind up throwing out that mental compass, because he's seen how him going back to do the right thing has not paid off for him. You know, I tried to reconcile with my brother. He killed himself. I tried to, you know, reconcile things with these old people, and I got screwed out of Sandpiper for however long. You know, I tried to do things for Kim so she wouldn't have to worry. She gets into a car accident, and who knows whatever the hell else might happen for the next season. So it's just going to wind up being the thing where he's going to throw out the moral compass just based off the fact that every time he tries to do something good, he gets fucked over, and the people that he tries to do things good for get fucked over as well.
Yeah, I can see that. And definitely, like, early in the season, the big message was when he tried to go straight, when he tried to do legitimate video business and tried to play by the rules, he kept getting screwed over and things didn't go his way. So the message was clear, as being like a honest, like, businessman was not working. So he needed to revert back to being slipping Jimmy, to slip and to con people. So that, yeah, that is, I think, going to be his sort of main takeaway. And also, I wanted to sort of defend why Jimmy might have went to Chuck, because I can kind of see that perspective, but I can kind of see why he did it, because I think him blaming himself for Kim's car crash, I think, had a bigger effect on him. And actually, I kind of agree with you, Phil, that I didn't quite buy this massive change in Jimmy, but I think it's what the show is going for. So I'll roll with them on this one. But
and I didn't mind it. It's just that it seemed like he had already gone the he's dead to me route, and for him to just go back with Kim, I get him changing in that situation, but I don't ultimately get him going right back to Chuck like that. Like, okay, let's forgiveness. I think what does Jimmy want in that situation from Chuck? Does he just want Chuck to take partial responsibility for one moment in time, just to be like, okay, part of this is my fault? Like, what is he hoping to accomplish in that situation? I don't know.
I think what I got from him is that he was wanting to reconcile with Chuck. He was wanting to go back to that relationship that he missed and keep what's important to him, because I think that Kim's car crash made him realize that he needs
so masochistic. That's so masochistic. Another reason why he becomes fucking Saul Goodman, because ultimately it's going to break. He's breaking bad or breaking good or whatever. He's eventually going to explode from all of this shit and having to be that person that what other people want to be, because just like a dancer that just has to dance. Dad, I have to dance. He has to con. It's inside him. You can only be who you can be. I need to talk like a fucking idiot over and over again and fucking jump around like a sock puppet. That's what I do. I can't help doing it. Jimmy has to con people, and he can't help it. It's Mr. Hyde that's going to take over eventually.
I just want to go back to Howard for a second, because there was one interesting thing I wanted to bring up about him, is that before the season started, I watched an interview with the actor. The actor was saying that you'd see that this season 3, that Howard was actually going to be appalled by the lengths Chuck will go to get back at his brother, and how he's letting his vendetta against his brother destroy him. And I actually, I wasn't seeing that for most of the season. I was looking out for it, and I think we didn't really get a clear picture of that until the finale.
I feel like that's a misinterpretation by the actor and what actually happened, of a fact of the most of those guys, they probably only know by the script that they write in, the scene they shot, but how they finally got edited, that's not what it said at all.
Well, I do think it did come to that in the finale, though, where
but I think
Howard had a line about how, you let your personal vendettas destroy the company. So I think that's an after.
I agree with you, but that's more to the point of him exploding and letting things kind of just build up on him. Something he should have dealt with at the time, because in the moment he was like, "Chuck, I'm fine, I support you." At that point, he should have just been like, "Listen, we need to take a break. You need to take a leave of absence." It all ultimately culminated with that straw of the insurance situation. But you are right. You're absolutely right.
And I think that's why Kim's words were so effective to him, because she was right. He was enabling Chuck, and I think he was able to see that he was enabling, and he should have spoke up against Chuck much earlier.
Yep. Fuck Chuck.
Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and switch gears here and move on to the other side of Better Call Saul. Now, this is actually something that I'm still kind of iffy about on the show overall. Don't get me wrong, I still love the show and I love that they do it. But the disconnect between like the Mike, Nacho, Hector, and Gus stuff, and the Saul, Jimmy and Kim stuff, I hope. And then that's why I feel like we desperately need another season, because we need to see these blend together, come back together, because after now they're a bit rigid, but that's fine because I love the stuff. So
yeah. And to a point, it's even getting more fragmented where the Mike stuff is separated now from the Nacho and the Hector and the Gus stuff completely, to the point where Mike wasn't even in the finale because there was no natural organic place to put him in the finale, because his story ended in the last episode, which could have ended a couple of episodes ago with the handshake with Gus and then meeting Lydia. They could have done that all in the same episode, but they're like, oh, we got to put Mike in another episode, so let's just put that Lydia in the next episode. Was really kind of part of just once he shakes Gus's hands, like the next scene could be him in that scene with Lydia. They didn't need to like put that to another episode, but I think they ran out of Mike's story this season. But I think he's the binding force. He's the thing that needs to be the binding force between the two worlds.
Yeah, and I think he'll probably come into play more next season. But yeah, let's talk a bit about Mike in particular, because actually, to be perfectly honest, I found his storyline kind of the weaker ones of the season, just because I thought a lot of these montages scenes, which I know that the showrunners love doing these montages and they're actually really cool. But personally, I think the Mike montages this year went on a bit too long and were a bit far too numerous and sort of slowed everything down. I know a lot of people violently disagree with me, but that's just the way I saw it. And also, like, the journey Mike goes through this year isn't like too much. Basically, he just finds out, that someone's telling him, and it leads him to Gus. And it seems like all that took a bit too long to get to this point, because as an audience, we saw Gus on the preview, so we knew Gus was coming, so we know what was coming. So
they had like so little story for him, so they had to stretch it out.
Yeah, but it was interesting, like with that he sort of had this change, because at first he was like pushing himself away from the criminal stuff, away from Gus and all that. But then it seemed like his interactions he had with like the school, the other parents at the thing, talking to the lady who had her husband, die and go missing. I guess that weighed on his conscience, so he wanted to get more involved with the innocent bystander that Hector killed and getting him sort of drawn back into it. And of course, it all leads up to this handshake with Mike and Gus. And of course, we know from Breaking Bad that that Mike eventually becomes Gus's right-hand man. Mm-hmm. So I'm sort of curious to where, first of all, what do you think of his storyline this season, and where you think like Mike might go from here?
With Mike, I think unfortunately for us as fans of Mike, everything that Mike did this season was ultimately to service other characters' progression, whether it be Gus being introduced to this world and further seeing what it's like to join Gus's organization, whether it be his vendetta against the Salamancas and trying to shoot them, and basically everything that have to do with Hector, everything having to do with Mike wanting to get revenge on the Salamancas was all to service Nacho at the end of the season, to the point where Nacho took over for Mike at a certain point in time, almost like they tagged each other. I said this in my review, tagged each other like a Scrubs perspective. And Nacho at the end of the season became the second lead of the show. And the scene what he had with Gus, where Gus told him why not to kill Hector, was to pay off the scene at the end of the season where Gus saves Hector's life, where we know why he did that and why he was keeping an eye on Nacho, and that he's going to probably have a similar conversation with Nacho next season to try to do that. So with Mike, I think I love Mike. I love all the Mike scenes. I think Mike was the highlight of season 2. I think that was Mike's season in a lot of ways. He killed it that season. I think he ran out of story, a lot to do with what Mark said, because he has the most predictable story ultimately on the show. We know exactly where he goes. We don't know exactly the elements that turn Jimmy McGill into Saul Goodman. We don't know exactly the elements that put Hector, now we do, that puts Hector into the wheelchair, maybe not completely. We don't know all the elements of how Gus consolidates his power and does all that sort of stuff. With Mike, we know Mike joins up with Gus. We know Mike works with Saul. We know all of that, and we know he protects his family. And they've almost gone too far, too fast with him. And they just, it seems like I hope we don't see less and less of Mike as time goes on. I think we're going to see more because, as I mentioned, I think he has to be the bridging gap between the two worlds. And that's why I think we may see a time jump at some point, and then go to a point where Saul has his law license again and he's using Mike in a lot of different manners and representing some of the crews. I don't know. And that might not be till season 5, but Mike's storyline was my least favorite this season.
I don't know if Mike's storyline was my least favorite, but I think that it might have been like there were times where they stretched out certain things a little too long, like the whole thing with him trying to figure out how he was being tracked. It was an interesting sequence, and it shows how Mike's brain works. But yeah, it was a little too long. But that was our way into Nacho. And you know what, though? Can I just say that I love that there's a guy who's called Nacho? Like what kind of crazy shit is that when you got a gangster who's called Nacho? You know, so yeah, I gotta admit that I actually love that. Mike this season, unfortunately, you know, I think they were trying to set up for what they're going to do with Gus next season. And so Mike was just kind of the segue into getting there. So it was like, all right, we need Mike here because Mike is the way that we get to Gus. So we can't just be like, okay, Mike, you're here for 2 episodes. See you next season, and everything be about Gus. So they're trying to tie everything in together. And unfortunately, it didn't leave Mike with much to do as of yet. And, you know, I think it's going to pick up again next season. Because Mike hasn't gone full cartel. We need Mike to go full cartel first. And I think once he ties into the actual cartel storyline where he becomes one of Gus's most trusted advisors or stooges or whatever he was to Gus, then we're going to see things start to pick up again.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I think they're all sort of interconnected. Like what you were saying, Phil, earlier about sort of Mike tagging Nacho. I would say it's, you know, that's true, but it could also be in the case that Mike tagged Gus, because in episode 4, we saw a shift from Mike to Gus. And I think it's all like Mike is the bridge to bring Gus in, but Mike's also going to be, he's actually going to be like the intermediary between Jimmy or Saul and Gus, because from Breaking Bad, we pretty much know that Saul never actually meets Gus. He knows of a guy from a guy from a guy. So I think Mike is sort of the connecting from that. And so Gus is going to bring Mike into the criminal world more, and Mike is going to bring Saul into the criminal world more, and it's all sort of connected.
And I also think we know how Mike is going to ultimately give a blood oath to Gus. We've got a couple of hints of that. The fact of Gus saying, I would never take your money. I'm not taking tax for protecting your money. I would never take money away from your family. And the line that Lydia says in the scene with Mike and Lydia, where you think this guy's a simple drug dealer. Oh, he's much more than that. Gus is going to do something great for Mike, is going to do something really, really selfless and a really important thing for Mike and the protection of his family, which is going to make him ultimately love that man, which is the reaction he has when Walt does what he does when he first sees Walt. It's like, you don't know what you did. You don't know how that guy was protecting so many people. He's protecting my family. And it's all going to go to shit. He was important. And he also said that had it set up that if it went down, it was going to go down on him or someone, or had someone else set up, had the Salamanca set up, whatever Gus's plan was. He had outs, and the only thing he couldn't account for was fucking Walter White and Gus's own ego that we'll talk about that a little bit later, but with not letting Hector die because of his own vendetta of his own. One other thing I wanted to mention, someone asked in the chat about Nacho and Breaking Bad. There's no exact mention unless we're to think that is the person that Jesse is talking about when he first talks to Walt about Saul. He says, "Oh, my friend Ignacio, he got him off a bunch of times." And I believe Nacho's real name on the show is Ignacio. So it is possible that that is going to be our Jesse Pinkman connection eventually, where Nacho and Jesse become buddies somehow. That's a little fan fiction-y, but it is the same name, and Jesse does mention a character named Ignacio. He does not say Nacho, but he says that night, or is it Saul that mentions him or something?
No,
well, yeah, there's a
Saul
yeah.
Mentions him when
they confirm
when they're in the I'm confusing two different things. Mentions him
when they kidnap him and take him to the desert. He thinks that they're going to shoot him, and he's like, "No, it wasn't me. It was Ignacio."
What was Jesse's? But I'm confusing it with Jesse does say someone his buddy gets him off. I'm going to Google to figure out what that name is.
Yeah, I actually went back recently and watched that scene from Breaking Bad, and he definitely, with Saul in the desert, he definitely says, he starts speaking Spanish because he thinks of the cartel. He says, "It wasn't me, it was Ignacio." So that is what we're going to need to see in one of the coming seasons. Okay, what brings Saul and Nacho together? But before, I want to talk a bit more about Mike there before we get on to the Nacho train, is that with one thing I wanted to bring up is it was interesting to actually see Lydia. I was actually surprised. I had actually forgotten, once I thought about it, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense that Lydia was the one working with Gus to establish his legitimate empire and his whole undercurrent thing. And that just totally slipped my mind. So when she showed up, I was like, holy fuck, it's Lydia. Because we never actually see Lydia and Gus together on Breaking Bad, because Lydia wasn't introduced until after Gus died on that show. So it was interesting to actually see the two of them together. And with Mike in particular, I think the one thing that is his story that we do need to see, I think he does have some importance in his story left that we definitely need to see in the coming seasons, and that is how he comes to trust Gus. And I think you were saying earlier, Phil, that we see the ties of that, but I think at the moment, it's like you said, he's saying, he's just this drug dealer guy. And at the moment, he doesn't seem to want to have much to do with the criminal world. So we need to see the two of them sort of come together, and then sort of him bring Saul into this. And of course, there's elements that Nacho might be tied into this as well, and how he brings Saul into this world.
Yeah, I definitely it's going to be fun to see that, and I agree. I mean, I think we're all basically saying the same thing, that Mike is the tie that binds all of this together, and it's going to be interesting. And that's one thing I do question too. No, because he's there when the box cutter incident and all of that sort of stuff. Mike eventually has to take the pill and take the Kool-Aid and go full in. He doesn't always
full measures.
Yeah, he doesn't always have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and just do money collections. That's probably most of what he does, but he does go in the high end as well too, because we see him with Jesse doing that money pickup type stuff for a while. But I think that's just some of his busy work that he does because he doesn't have anywhere else to go. So he's like, I've been doing that all along. I'll do that too. But now he obviously does some more high end things
What's also interesting is that Saul seems pretty ignorant of all this, because when Mike at one point beats the crap out of Saul, and Mike was like, "My own PI kicked my ass," so he's still thinking of Mike as a PI when really he's actually Gus's right-hand man, which Saul isn't even aware of. So that's going to be, I think they're going to keep that continuity in here, where Saul will never know of what Mike's getting into on his end.
Yeah. I tend to agree. If it would be recanoning the world if you had Gus and Saul actually meet and interact and work together. But Mike could use Saul as a outsourcing force in the same way he used Met like Polos or something like that, where we get interactions without actually getting interactions.
Yeah, I mean, they had a cool way of cheating that this season where we actually get to see Jimmy and Gus together, but Jimmy
Yeah.
had no idea who Gus was.
Yeah, that was a great scene. That was a great scene.
Cool. All right, so yeah, why don't we just go ahead then and move on and talk about our last character, which is Nacho, because this is a character, like, at first I was wondering why is he even mentioned as a main cast member, because we barely see him. Like, we didn't see him that much. We saw him a little bit in season 1, season 2, not really, just popped up like selling drugs to that nerdy guy with the baseball cards. And at the start of season 3, he was basically just a goon for Hector who would just show up in the background. I'm like, why is he this main character? But then half into the season, he totally comes on his own. And I think I heard somewhere that the actor who plays Nacho was promised that you're not going to be that important for the first couple of seasons, but you will become important later on. I think we're seeing the start of that, and I think that's only going to mushroom bigger. But the one thing I want to talk about Nacho, which I think is interesting, and it's a question I wanted to ask you guys, because this is what I thought, is when I was watching that scene in the finale where Nacho, the pills take effect with Hector, is do you think Gus knew what Nacho was doing? Because I had this theory that Mike told Gus about Nacho, and Gus was having Nacho monitored, and that the whole thing, like, Gus knew was going to happen. He was sort of helping Nacho along. And then when Nacho went to like kill Hector, like to assassinate him with the gun, the fact that the goons showed up in time to stop Nacho kind of reminded me of the whole when Mike went to go shoot Hector and he got that car honking and the note that said don't. I think that was Gus's doing by setting up the meeting. He knew that Nacho would be interrupted and would prevent him from killing Hector, and he purposely tried to agitate Hector in order to facilitate an attack. And what's interesting to note is after Hector collapsed, he turns to the other two goons, says stash the guns, not Nacho, but the other two goons, says stash the guns and do it in order to distract them so they can't see Nacho picking up the pills and doing the swap again. That's sort of my mindset. I don't know what you guys think of that.
I totally agree, 100%. The look on his face was like, oh yeah, I know what you're doing. You're trying. You're not going to get there yet, but you're on the right path. So I think that we're going to see him proposition Nacho once Hector is in the chair and can't do a damn thing for himself.
Yeah, he's gonna ultimately come to thank Nacho. I don't know if he knows exactly what Nacho was up to, but Gus is one of those guys that just, I wouldn't want to play poker with him. He just can get tells on people. And then once he walked in the room, and also Nacho, the actor and the character, is very emotive as well, and made it very obvious his hate and disdain for Hector, and many times this season with Gus around. Like every time he saw Gus, him and Gus shared some strange looks. So Gus immediately knew something was up. I mean, I think ultimately he probably spotted him, or as you guys were saying, spotted him in that moment with the pill situation, and he definitely shot him a look when he handed the pills to the ambulance worker, like, okay, so that's how you did it. I think that was the kind of look. It was like, I'm not sure how you did this, but I know you're responsible for this somehow. His spider sense was tingling, and when he saw the pills, he's like, oh, okay, that's how it happened. And I think when Hector eventually, maybe from this, which I'm thinking, if not this, somewhere in the beginning of the season, he'll have like a second stroke or something. But I think this is probably going to be the wheelchair event, the Bell event. And if that's the case, Gus is going to have a reaction like, you did something I had very specific plans for, Hector Salamanca, but you know what? This is even better. Way to go. Thank you. Get some free chicken. You want to join my organization? Like, come on. Or no, why don't you control the Salamancas and I'll work through you? And not just be like, I kind of want to get out of the game. I'm just going to run my father's shop or something like that. Because even though Hector's going to be in the wheelchair, his first order of business as like an angry Hector, not even because he blames Nacho for what happens, is going to be like killing anyone that pisses him off. And his father's going to be one of the first people. Like, I think Nacho's father's probably going to be killed by Hector, in wheelchair or not, next season. Maybe it's past that point, but I think Nacho is going to have to pay somewhat in some way for what he did?
Well, I think it's an interesting question because in the chat, Virginia Gio says Gus knows about the pills. That's obvious. But the interesting question is when Gus shoots Nacho the look when he hands the medics the pills, is that, as you say, Phil, him figuring out that, oh, I see what you did there? Or did Gus was already aware? And I could actually go either way, but I think there is some evidence to say that Gus was already aware because we've seen the way he was with Mike. He monitored Mike and he's very, very good at monitoring people. So I do find it hard to believe that he didn't already know about Nacho, that Nacho was planning this and he had him under surveillance the whole time already. But it could be, maybe he didn't. Maybe he just figured it out when he handed the pills. It could go either way. And I hope we do get some more of insight on this. But either way, I do think that Gus, I totally agree that he's going to be looking into recruiting Nacho, maybe as a spy or whatever. I think the way that Nacho did the pills so secretly, and he managed to pull it off without anyone notice, I sort of tend to lean away from the theory that wheelchair Hector will go after Nacho's father, because I think would be the furthest thing from his mind at the moment. But that would be interesting if he did, because the whole purpose of Nacho doing that,
especially if he found out he was working with Gus.
Yeah, if Hector finds out he's working with Gus. But another interesting thing, though, is if we go from Breaking Bad time when we see Hector for the first time, he's just living out in the desert or somewhere where Tuco's taking care of him. He doesn't really have any power. And then after that, he goes to a nursing home once Tuco dies. So I get the impression, and especially we see at this scene where he tells the cartel guy, oh, the boss can suck me. I get the impression that after he gets paralyzed, like the cartel's just going to be like distance him, like fuck this guy. And once he's in that wheelchair, he's actually going to have no power because of
Hugo's going to take over the family when he comes over from jail.
Yeah. And I think that was actually a good setup by having him say that, because when he said that, I was like, oh, fuck, you don't fucking say that to the cartel boss.
No, this is personal. Oh, yeah, that was listen, Hector is another asshole who he deserved to be in that wheelchair. I mean, like, if you think back to Breaking Bad and the way that him and Don Ilario treated Gus Fring, I mean, look, Gus came really kind of humbly, like, hey, look, I'm in the drug game already. I'm, trying to migrate or whatever. I'm coming to you and trying to respectfully show you what we're doing here. They smacked him around and killed his partner.
Yeah, killed his dude, yeah.
Yeah, and then ever since then, it's like, how can I keep my foot on this man's neck? Okay, oh, he's an American now? All right, well, you know what? Fuck it. You're going to start moving my drugs for me. And, yeah, just because you own this place doesn't mean you own this place, because I own you. So, yeah, fuck Hector Salamanca, him and his stupid bell, and yeah, I want to see what's going to happen, because you notice now we haven't seen Tuco, and I don't know if it's because the actor is busy, but it's like anytime you think that Tuco's supposed to be getting out, it's like, oh, Tuco got into a fight, they gave him another 6 months, and just like, he's going to be in it forever, he's never going to fucking get out. I forgot what episode that was, but yeah.
I have a question for both of you guys, ultimately, that connects to this. Do you think that, I mean, no, it's a loaded question because we know where it ends. What do you think of Gus's mistake of keeping Salamanca alive? Don't you just let a guy like that die? It's his urge to make someone suffer that costs him his life. He's a calculating individual, and I know he wants to make him pay, but ultimately in this situation, I know he wants to be the one responsible, but you can't help but think that ultimately the only in that Walt got on him was through Hector. And Walt probably could not have got him if it wasn't for understanding Gus's weakness, which is his vendetta against Hector. And ultimately, there's a certain point in time where you just needed to kill him. And I think at this point, he probably should have just let him die and like looked in his eyes. It was a good moment. Yeah, his last thoughts are that all of his business got moved over to Gus. Gus won. He could just smile at him while he died. And I just think it would have been a good way. Maybe step on his neck a little bit, have his guys shoot Hector's guys or something, whatever. Like, who knows? If you knew that Nacho was on his side there, just turn and go, you have a decision to make, Nacho. You know, or something, whatever. He just told the bosses, like you guys said, he just told the bosses to go fuck themselves twice. Once on the phone where maybe it was a little interference, but no. Then he just called Bosa and Don Ilario to go eat his fucking dick that he is their boss. You fucking, again, I'll echo what Don Willi said. Fuck you, Hector Salamanca. Who the fuck are you? You are stupid. Your whole family is fucking gone, and they're just gonna be at the bottom of the barrel now because you just you fucked up, dude. And I just think that was a perfect opportunity for Gus to just let him die there. And I think that ultimately will be. And I know it's cheap, but not to the people that have never seen Breaking Bad. But sorry, spoiler. That's his demise. And
yeah, I totally agree, and that's why this is so perfect setup. In fact, in some ways, I feel like, particularly with this Gus and Hector storyline, those who have watched Breaking Bad actually get more out of it than those who haven't, because we get more rich, because we already know we got the flashback in Breaking Bad of Hector.
This is how you make a prequel work, other people.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Like, whatever they do, copy it. It's okay. Just copy it.
This is by far the best prequel, like, ever.
Yeah, like I don't even think it's hard for me to even think of one that compares to it.
But but those who haven't seen Breaking Bad will still enjoy the storyline. Don't get me wrong; it's still good. But those who have, like, they get even more out of it because we know where it ends, and we actually know a bit more about what came before as well, which is really interesting. And I totally agree that this is Gus's downfall for not simply killing Hector, but the way Gus looks at it is he wants Hector to suffer through losing the power. He doesn't want him to just die. He wants him to be alive, to be paralyzed, to be sick. Like that position he's in a nursing home, like Gus is in heaven. Like that's exactly where he wants Hector to be, to see all of his power gone, to see other people ruling over him, to see him have nothing and just be a lonely old man in a nursing home. And that's why at the end of Breaking Bad, when Gus goes to kill Hector, he's actually sad. He's like, I really don't want to kill you, but you left me no choice. Now it's finally time to put you out of your misery. And you're totally right that is his downfall. In fact, Walter actually could see that. He was a smart guy too. He could see that Hector was his weak spot and what he needed to exploit in order to get Gus.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think it's because, his partner, and I forget what his partner's name was. I mean, supposedly that was, like his lover or whatever. Hector blew his brains out right in front of him. And it's just one of those things where, at that point, Hector had been trying as much as he could to make Gus's life a living hell beyond that. So it's kind of like, well, you know what? You took the one person I really loved away from me. You've spent years, basically trying to put me in a chokehold. Now I'm going to make you feel what I felt ever since then and more because of that. And yes, that was his downfall. That wasn't a smart thing for him to do. But it's one of those things where it's kind of like, all right, well, I need my revenge though. This man, because for him, Gus just feels like Hector Salamanca is too evil, and you can't just let evil die in an instant. Evil must be choked out slowly. It must be deprived of air.
Not to me. If I find evil, I'm sneaking up with a gun behind that shit and shooting it. Kill that evil quick, Don Willi. Be done with it. Fucking die, evil.
If you try to do that, Phil, then Gus is gonna honk a horn and leave a note saying "don't."
I want to correct the former mistake that I had where I was absolutely wrong. But the character that Jesse mentions that Saul gets off many times is Emilio, who is Crazy Eight's cousin.
Okay.
Crazy Eight on the show, so that might be our introduction to Jesse through when we finally meet Crazy Eight's cousin Emilio, who is mentioned that Saul got him off a couple times. So that might be our Jesse cameo somehow with Crazy, because we've seen Crazy Eight a couple times on the show.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that does make sense. And getting back to the Nacho ties, that he was mentioned when Saul said, "Oh, in the desert when he's tied up," and he said, "It wasn't me, it was Ignacio." So that we know that Nacho's going to get tied into some shit that the cartel could possibly want to kill him for. Now, whether or not they actually do kill him is a good question, or whether or not they don't know at this point. So I think that will tie into what Nacho gets involved with Gus, is especially that look that you see Gus give him. I do think either way, Gus is going to, want to hook up with Nacho, and so they're going to get tied into some shit that's could potentially get them killed by the cartel. So that's going to be really interesting. I'm so excited to see. And one last thing I want to say about Nacho is that scene that we got in the earlier episode where he was actually throwing the pills into Hector's coat. Like, bravo. Like, you talk about you talk about the chicanery scene with Michael McKean being one of the so beautiful, and I totally agree. But I think this is another brilliant thing. Like, the actor who played Nacho, I think Michael Mondo, I think his name is, he did such an amazing job of portraying someone who was like terrified for his life, because if he dropped those pills, he's dead. Like, Hector has him killed, he's dead, and he knows it. But at the same time, he's trying to act like everything's okay to Hector, so Hector doesn't see the fear. And he played that duality of someone who is afraid and trying to hide this fear so well. It's just such a brilliant scene.
Yeah, I mean, like, and he's practiced. He's sitting up there, like, practicing, like, okay, I got to make sure I can hide the pills so that they can't be seen. I got to figure out a way to get the pills out of his pocket, because it's not just about putting the pills in his pocket and, no, I have to get the pills out of his pocket, swap them out, and then get them back in without him noticing. So, yeah, because one fuck up. Because then also, too, and I was up there like, is that cook going to see? Because there was the cook in the background there, and I'm like, is the cook cartel, and is the cook going to see? And then what about the other guy that's always running back and forth with Hector, too? I'm like, is he going to just kind of walk in when doing any of this stuff? I'm like, shit, man, but he walked in early, and Hector was kind of like, listen, motherfucker, I'm reading my paper. Get the fuck out of here.
It was such a great touch, too, that after he pulled it off, like, his hands were shaking with the coffee, because it was just like...
He's incredible, and he's an upcoming actor. He was in the Far Cry video games, that's what he was, and he's going to be in Spider-Man Homecoming as well.
Oh, is he? Okay.
He's going to be Mark Gargan on Spider-Man Homecoming. But yeah, he's a relative. That guy. I have no fucking clue. But he's been in like a lot of like shorts. This is his first like really big role, except for, or he's an Orphan Black. I'm looking at his IMDb right now.
Oh, was he? Oh, I don't remember seeing him.
He was Vic in Orphan Black in 13 episodes.
Okay, that must have been the bad season I didn't like. So I don't remember him. But
I can tell you in 1 second. Season 2, episode 9, or season 2.
Okay, season 2. It's forgettable. But yeah, I mean, and that's another thing. Getting back to what you were saying earlier, Phil, about how great the show is at humanizing characters, that you have someone who's basically just a goon. He's just a villain, but they so flesh out his character to show like a good side of him. Like, on one hand, he could totally like, con and like capable of killing people. But you see, especially that episode where you see the toll that all the nasty shit Hector's doing is taking on him, that he hates doing it, and putting his father in jeopardy, and the love he has for his father. The way that they humanize this character is amazing. Like, I don't know if I've seen many shows, maybe The Wire, but very few shows like take like despicable goons or like this and make them really like relate to them and feel for them.
Yeah. Yeah, show's excellent at that. And I haven't watched Orphan Black, so I don't know who this is. Smokey Over the Line says Vic the Dick season 1 and 2.
All right. Okay, I'll have to go back, and I don't really remember that.
Is that show
it's been a while.
Is that show is that worth a watch?
Yeah, it's okay. I would probably recommend other shows over it, like Black Sails, if you still haven't seen that yet. But yeah, Orphan Black is doing their final season this year, and to be honest, I'm not happy with it so far, but we'll see where it goes. Hopefully it'll get better. But with Orphan Black, like the first season's amazing, the second season's the third season's shit, and the fourth season got better again. So that's how that goes.
So yeah, I think Nacho, Michael Mondo, he definitely adds another element, and I hope they find a way to connect to what we were talking about Mike a little while ago. I hope they find a way to balance all of this. They have they have an embarrassment of riches of good stuff, especially now with Chuck leaving the show theoretically as a big major force. And even if he is still to be on it, at least in a lesser factor, since that story seems to have come to conclusion. So moving forward, we have Kim and Jimmy and whatever is their future work situation. Then we need to have the Mike mixing with the Nacho and the fallout for the Salamanca with Gus situation. There needs to be a way to galvanize all this shit together. And I hope they can do that. I hope it's not, now that we've established Nacho as a main character on the show, I hope they don't go back. I hope starting next season he's just not in the background again. And because I think he's earned a percentage of the episodes now, and that's what's crazy about Breaking Bad versus Better Call Saul, because in Breaking Bad, essentially there's a lot of really great stuff peripheral going on, but I'll argue the Skylar storyline or the Hank's wife, I'm blanking on her name right now, stealing shit line was stuff that when Walt or Jesse weren't on screen, or Hank, or even, but mainly with Walt and Jesse, and then eventually Gus and stuff. But it was really all about Walt and Jesse. They were the main focus characters. Better Call Saul is more of an ensemble piece. It's not Bob Odenkirk's show. It's everybody's show. And as this ensemble keeps growing, I wonder how they're going to do that. That becomes a big problem with shows. But I hope they get the right balance, and sometimes they do. I think like episode 9 was a good example of how they had a very good balance of everything in once. The episode was tighter than the rest of the season was edited, because it was like point for point. Instead of lingering on shots, they like just went right into the next shot and the next scene a lot. And it's not that I don't like the lingering stuff, but I also like that feeling of that anxiety feeling of like there's so much going on and there's so much to do, and give me a slightly more excited feel as this world slowly turns into the more pulpy world of Breaking Bad. And I think that's through Nacho and through Mike.
Absolutely. All right, cool. So I want to sort of wind up this discussion here. I want to sort of close in talking about something that something I always kept in mind, because I read this article before season 1 started, so before the show started, that their original idea was that the show he was against calling it a prequel, because his original idea was that the show would start with before Breaking Bad times, would move into Breaking Bad times, and then move beyond it. And then I've read later on that even though that was their original intent, is that when they got caught up into this world with Chuck and Nacho and all that, they decided there was so much there to explore, so they decided to focus more on that and keep that as the main focus of the show. But my question is do they plan on actually still going sort of beyond Breaking Bad times? Because I know we still get those Gene scenes at the start of every season, and I feel, and I have had other commenters who agree that we feel that they definitely are going to explore that at the end of the show, and they could in fact possibly even do like a whole season on it, maybe just like a couple episodes or two. But it seems like that's what we're building to. So, and I read an interview recently with Bob Odenkirk, who says that he feels there's enough material for the show to go for 5 seasons easily. And then Vince Gilligan said that they had enough material to go for beyond 5 seasons beyond what Breaking Bad says. He says, I'm not sure that's what we're going to do, but he says we could if we wanted to. And then,
Peter
of course,
Gould unfortunately said that he'd rather end the show early than go too long. So I think Peter Gould seems to be the rider of this dragon, where Vince was the rider of the dragon in Breaking Bad. This is ultimately Peter's baby that he brought Vince in, where Breaking Bad was the other way around. Because originally, a lot of people know this, that the original concept for Better Call Saul was from Peter Gould, who wanted to do a 30-minute comedy prequel of in Jimmy's office and Better Call Saul, like essentially like a Saul Goodman, like right before the time of Breaking Bad. And then he's like, they started getting into that, and they're like, oh, why don't I bring Vince in on this? Brought Vince in, which made it the show that it is, and the combination of the two of them. But ultimately, Peter Gould is more in charge than anybody when it comes down to this show. And I think he wants to end with making people want more. He said that in a couple of interviews where he's like, so I have a feeling that either way, we're getting a season 4, but I think the show ends on season 4. And
oh, really?
I think so. See, I think next season's going to be like, I want to be wrong. I'm going to preface this because I have to run the bathroom real quick, and I'm going to listen to you because I'll still be able to hear you from the bathroom. I want to be wrong. Tell me why I'm wrong, Mark.
Well, I don't know if you're wrong, but I do agree with what you said about Peter Gould and how he wants to end the show like at a high note. In fact, I think Vince Gilligan would actually agree with that, because that's what they did with Breaking Bad. They wanted to complete the story and go at a high note. With what Vince Gilligan said about the show going longer than 5 seasons is what he specifically said is that our main character isn't dying of cancer. So we were not on that sort of time frame. But I think in terms of story, I think they're both on the same page that they want to end it on a high note. However, to me, 5 seasons makes more sense than 4 seasons. And in fact, it was actually refreshing to hear both Bob Odenkirk and Vince talk about 5 seasons. And I think they could still keep Peter Gould's vision of ending like wanting more on a high note, but do it in 5 seasons, because there's still a lot that we need to tie up. And I do think we need to.
I'm sorry, Mark. I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid because we're this far in. They could have fucking announced the renewal on the stupid fucking Chris Hardwick bullshit show. What he does, they're talking bad. That was the time to announce it. Instead, they were friggin' random about it. Yeah, we still haven't been picked up for 4. They're gonna get 4, but I think it's a struggle. It's a struggle right now. And the couple of things that they've said about it is that it's going to happen. It's just in the works. We should get a deal. And then like through the line, they're like, our relationship is really with Fox, not with AMC. We like AMC, but Fox is really the company that is like pushed our show through and supports us. You know, so I'm worried about AMC, Mark. I'm worried about fucking AMC.
Well, hey, if I can interject real quick. Look, please. Man, look, fuck the bullshit. If Fear of the fucking Walking Dead get renewed for another goddamn season, as bullshit as that fucking show is, yo, listen, I you know what? I will suggest riots in the streets if they do not renew Better Call Saul and fucking Fear the Walking Dead got renewed. Just fuck Fear the Walking Dead and fuck Into the Badlands too.
All right. There's 2 things in my relationship with my wife that we get into fights with. One is her horrible taste in a certain band that I'm not going to mention here. The other is her like of Fear of the Walking Dead. We argue about that because that show sucks.
All right, well, here's my position, and this is where I look at it, the show, is that I think from a story perspective, they definitely need 2 more seasons, at least, at the minimum, in order to wrap everything up. But then there's the practical concerns that you bring up, which are valid concerns, which is why I'm not entirely sure that we will get 2 more seasons. I think it's altogether possible that they will try to tie things up in season 4. But I do feel, personally, just looking at the way the show's gone so far, that if they do decide, all right, we're not sure if we're going to get renewed, so let's end it in season 4. I do get the feeling in season 4 will feel rushed, or a lot of things will feel unresolved. I feel that from a writer's perspective, that everything that I've seen and heard indicates that they want 2 more seasons. The big question is whether or not they can get 2 more, because you're right. We don't even know at this point if we're going to get a season 4, and I'm confident that they will. Because they're getting critical praise, they're getting Emmy Awards nominations.
It's the season 5 I'm worried about. I'm confident in the 4. I'm not confident in the 5. Because in fact, and I keep mentioning it, sorry to pub another podcast, but the Better Call Saul Insiders podcast, what they were saying, what they were arguing at the end of the podcast when it came up, yeah, we actually haven't been picked up yet. So yeah, we'll be back though. We're going to get season 4. And then they start making the case for, yeah, but like actually this could have been a decent place to end. And then they're like arguing again. They're like, no, actually, no, we have so much more to say. Kind of what you were saying. We have like, we can tell 2 or 3 more seasons, but there's still that thing in the room that it's been hard. And unless they have AMC, oh God, fuck, man. Like they know a new show, regardless of how crappy it is when it first comes on the air for those first couple of months, is going to get them better ratings than a show that has a loyal fan base of 1 million people that really fucking love it. I think we definitely get the season 4. We'd get the critical acclaim, hopefully get some awards and kind of push them through, and they'll HBO wire this shit. Like where HBO was not doing too well. The ratings for The Wire, from HBO standards even, was pretty poor, and they loved the show, so we got so many seasons of it because HBO championed the show. And I hope AMC and Fox do the same thing with Better Call Saul, and we get 5 or 6 seasons of it. Some part of me thinks next season's the last.
Well, another more recent example of that is with The Leftovers with HBO, because that was a show that's getting piss poor ratings, like even worse than Better Call Saul. Like its ratings were low, but HBO renewed it for a 3rd season because it was so critically acclaimed, because the critics loved it. It wasn't even winning Emmy Awards, but the critics loved it. It had a very strong, loyal fan base with people like demonstrating outside of HBO, renew the goddamn show. So they are like, okay, we'll renew it for a 3rd season. But the showrunners decided, well, we're uncertain of whether or not we got a 3rd season, but we probably won't get a 4th, so let's end it. So they decided to make that the final season. So I could see something like that happening with Better Call Saul. If their renewal is a bit, it depends on how their negotiations go with the AMC, I reckon, is that it depends. If they get the feeling that it's tangible and they have a feeling that they're on a thin, they might decide, let's make this the final season. Because what I think the showrunners don't want is they don't want to have their season end in a way that they expect to get another season, but then they never get to finish their story. I think they want to make sure that they end the show on their terms. So I do feel if there's only going to be 4 seasons, then it's because the showrunners are uncertain that they're going to get a 5th.
Listen, it doesn't cost them any fucking money. It doesn't cost them the goddamn money. AMC, Fox, whoever the fuck. Come on, man. It doesn't cost any fucking money. There's no big explosions. You're not worried about no fucking dragons and no goddamn wolves and giants. You don't have to worry about, oh, we gotta wait for 6 months until it's actually goddamn winter.
There's no ninjas and Black Widows and shit. Like, how much does Into the Badlands cost? How much? Take a little bit out of that budget. That show must cost a ridiculous fucking amount to make. Come on.
Right. You don't have to worry about putting hundreds of people in fucking zombie makeup and shit. It doesn't cost any fucking money. Stop being fucking assholes, AMC. Renew the goddamn show. Give the people what they want.
I mean, forget Fear the Walking Dead. Just The Walking Dead. the fact they're going to keep The Walking Dead on when it's just...
Yeah, I don't want to trash Fear the Walking Dead completely. Walking Dead isn't a much better show, and I don't even watch Fear the Walking Dead might in fact be better than Walking Dead right now. I just don't watch it to see. But Walking Dead this past season was piss poor crap.
Yes, absolutely. And the fact that they keep that going for another 5 years and they cancel Better Call Saul next year, going to piss me off beyond belief.
Walking Dead season 25, man. It's going to be like The Simpsons. It's going to be on forever.
Oh, I know. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that the ratings drop so far where they can't justify that.
Have you seen Airplane 2? You know, when the guy goes into the hangar and you see a poster in the background, you see Rocky 7 billion or something like that. That's going to be The Walking Dead. Carl and what's her name? Enid's fucking grandkid is gonna be the main character in season 25.
That's what the showrunners want to do. That's what
what's really do.
They've been on their record. Yeah, they've been on the record saying that's what they want, and I would drop off the show far.
No, but you know what? That sounds like. See that at that point, it sounds like you're a fucking money whore. You know, you're just like, oh, fuck it, it can make money. How much money can it make?
Wait, if you're a money whore, like this is we were talking about. If you know how many commercials they put in The Walking Dead, like that piece of shit, like that's half the problem.
I mean, I understand that, but I'm just saying it's one of those instances where it's like, oh, well, yeah, we could tell a story with a beginning, middle, and end. But why ended when they're going to send us boatloads of money? How much more money can it possibly milk? I don't know. We have a money cow, and when we squeeze the udders, more money comes out. Will it ever stop?
Well, see, that's the thing that I think, because we saw the ratings drop drastically in the last season. So if they continue to drop, then that money will stop flowing, and that is the only thing that would stop.
And I do have to say, for AMC, if we look at versus The Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead, which gets crazy ratings and all that sort of crap, because of the declining ratings and I don't know, declining ad sales, I can't be exactly sure. We've been lucky with Better Call Saul this season. I have to mention for AMC, especially in this final episode, I felt like the way that they're panning things out, and I think this team kind of pushes the issue with that. It felt like there were less AMC commercial breaks in this final episode and a couple of episodes of Better Call Saul where they had these long scenes before the intro credits and all that sort of stuff and pushing off. Like in this episode, there was that whole section where they pushed off the credits till the middle of the episode, and it seemed like forever. They have that short intro so they can stick more episode in there. So I think unlike The Walking Dead, which is like, oh yeah, just tell us. We'll have a couple of scare breaks with a huge crescendo of sound, and you can go to a commercial break. Better Call Saul is more about art, and I hope AMC respects that. It gives them credibility to support a show like that and have your crap The Walking Dead on too.
And I think a lot of award season, and that will probably have a big determination, not in the season 4, but in the season 5. And I think if award season goes really well, because Game of Thrones isn't going to be in consideration this year because it's coming out too late. So there's a chance Better Call Saul could take it. Fucking Michael McKean should take Best Supporting Actor. So if they do well, then that's going to play consideration and probably give them a lot more good faith that they can build off of. Great. Cool. So I think we can probably end this discussion here. It was really great talking to both of you guys. Thank you everyone in the chat so much for joining. I think I see Smokey over the line. Thanks for sticking with us. So great to have you both on to talk about this wonderful show, and hopefully we'll be back to talk about it. Not just next year, but the year after, but we'll see. I want to thank you guys so much. It's so great hearing your thoughts. First, if you guys have any let everyone know where they can find you and what's going on with your channel. Don, you want to start us off? What's going on with you?
Yeah, thank you again, Mark, for having me. As always, I love having these discussions with you. You can find me on my channel, Don Vice and Fire, where I discuss Game of Thrones stuff, and currently I'm doing a weekly series, Ice and Fire Opinions. I just did one about Rhaegar, and surprisingly there aren't any thumbs down yet, because I know how much people love Rhaegar, and I was not kind to Rhaegar or his legacy this week. So yeah, I do theory videos and the like, so yeah, come and check out the channel. It would be really appreciated. And Mark, can't wait to do this again.
And if people want to find me, check out my channel, Phil the Issues Guy. We do recaps and reviews of shows right after they air. Mainly live review stuff, but there are some pre-recorded silliness, some random song videos and Shit Buddies and Fresh Prince of Westeros videos. Definitely check out that stuff. It's some good goofiness. But definitely check us out during the Game of Thrones season. We'll be on after every episode, about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes to half an hour after it airs, depending on how fast my HBO Go runs with the episode loading up. Sometimes that's the most frustrating thing. And I'm like, I gotta take notes of this whole fucking episode and do a podcast afterwards. And HBO Go, the episode isn't loading up, you motherfucker. But yeah, definitely come in and listen to some of our silliness if you like it. Definitely hit the subscribe button, join the fun, join the best chat room around. Some really fucking awesome people, good vibes, good times. So Mark, it's always awesome to get to talk to you on these things. It's been too long. I can't wait for the next time. And Don, Willi, good to finally be on 2 podcasts in 24 hours with you. And have a great evening, guys. Thank you for everyone that checked us out.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for joining, Phil. Still a huge fan of your channel, so keep doing what you're doing. So me, I'm Mark. My channel's Enchantment of Eternity. If you're finding me for the first time, I just finished up covering Better Call Saul and The Leftovers. I'm moving over to Dark Matter and Orphan Black, but I'm not covering them every week, just every couple of weeks to touch in with them. I'm also going back and doing a lot more Star Trek stuff recently, covering every single season of Voyager, or every single episode of Voyager, one season at a time. And I'm also taking episode review requests for any of the 5 Star Trek series, so I'm getting more into that. And of course, Game of Thrones, I'm going to be doing a rewatch of seasons 4, 5, and 6, and going to put my reviews out for that, and going to cover each episode of Game of Thrones with 3 videos. So I'm looking forward to that. Huge Game of Thrones fans. Thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe, and thank you everyone for joining in the chat, and we will see you next time.